So testing the sound in the room, could Molly, if you're on the line and can hear me, can you come off mute and say that the sound's working?
Yes, the sound is working now.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to start over. Welcome to the planning board meeting of May 23rd, 2022. We'll jump into our first agenda item, which is the continuing public hearing of the definitive subdivision plan application of AWMW LLC for the improvement of Sunnyside Lane and the creation of 4 new lots. And I think tonight we are primarily focused on the end of the road, but
Oh, you want me to take this right?
I can jump in. So for the record, Molly Bendorf with Stamsky McNary. Mark White is also here with AWMW, the applicant for the project. And there was pretty much one outstanding item from the last meeting, which was the site distance issue that was brought up by engineering. And last week I had several conversations with the town engineer, Steve Dukran, to try and figure out how we could come up with a solution to this. So, and I will share my screen. So this has not been submitted. We haven't revised any plans yet. This is just simply a sketch to kind of demonstrate what we intend on doing and also what was kind of agreed upon with the town engineers, and Mark and me, and Elizabeth was also there as well. So basically what we have done, so the existing sidewalk that goes across Sunnyside Lane isn't directly adjacent to Losbrook Road. There's some vegetation in the middle, and then it's significant difference over here. So this is the existing sidewalk. And because the sidewalk was a little further back on Losbrook, that required a car, to not impede on pedestrians crossing, to stop a little further back. And then, the 28-inch oak was right in the way of the sight line. So what we are proposing to do is to shift the sidewalk on both sides. So at the entrance, it comes directly adjacent to Losbrook. We are proposing vertical granite curbing to provide that safety buffer between Losbrook Road and the sidewalk. And then what that does is it pulls the crossing further down towards the intersection. And what that allows us to do is propose a stop bar 8 feet back from Losbrook. So that's the stop bar there. There'll be a associated stop sign as well. And that allows a car to pull far enough forward to see not only past that 28-inch oak, but that 30-inch oak that's a little further up on Losbrook. So, and Mark, Elizabeth, Steve, and Justin were all on site and did confirm this in the field yesterday. So, and that allows us to keep all of these, mature trees within the right of way here. So that is what we will do moving forward, and that will be demonstrated on the revised plan. But it has been, verbally and agreed upon for everyone. So that will be shown on the revised plan and the final plan set. And I did want to bring up one other kind of new item. So NRC staff met with Mark on site yesterday afternoon to kind of go through, the trees within the basin, if we could potentially save any of the trees that we thought needed to be removed. And on site, they had discussed relocating the spillway. So we had proposed the spillway here outside the 50-foot at the request of NRC, no structures in the 50-foot. And in order to save a few more trees that would be otherwise removed over here for the spillway, what we're planning on doing is proposing the spillway here. And that would require us to reshape the basin because obviously having the spillway outside the 50-foot here would remove a small amount of the volume that's been provided in the basin. So with the potential combination of retaining walls and reshaping the basin, we intend to propose the spillway in this location and, you know, like I said, accommodate the volume elsewhere without expanding the footprint adjacent to the properties. So like I said, and the retaining wall has been preliminarily okayed by engineering. So if we go that route, you know, obviously the final plans would be reviewed and approved by engineering, but just wanted to kind of get that out there that there are some potential impacts to the basin with moving the spillway. But we have talked to engineering about this and they will do the final review and the volume provided in the basin will remain the same. So it will not be depleted. And the extent of the work will also not be expanded. So those were the new items that we wanted to bring up with the board tonight. So if there's any questions, or Mark, if you have anything to add to.
Speaking with Justin quite a bit about the retaining walls, and at a high level, he didn't have any issues, just wants to take a look at them. But his main concern was that as long as we get the volume.
And you don't need to go back before NRC for that?
We do.
What do you do?
Yeah, we haven't closed out with NRC yet, but I know that Delia and Mark have been working closely together on, you know, coming to the best resolution for the best possible design for this plan in order to save the most amount of trees possible. So
Great.
We will continue to work with them, and we haven't closed out with them yet.
We went tree by tree on top of the basin yesterday and marked the ones that, you know, we could try to save, and then the ones that definitely needed to go.
All right. So, and I take it then with that moving that stop line out slightly to the street, the town engineer is good.
Yes.
I mean, it looks like an overall improvement. It always seems easier to me as a pedestrian to cross a street when you're out on the corner, when there's two streets like that, so you can see traffic. So it seems like a good improvement all around. Does anybody else have any thoughts or comments on those changes? And
It seemed fine.
anything else that would need to be reflected in a draft approval that you guys would otherwise have at your next meeting?
When is the NRC meeting again?
Is it next Wednesday, Roland?
I think it is next Wednesday. Yes.
Okay.
So I'd like to think we could close. I mean, really the outstanding, I mean, there's such a small portion of the site that's under their jurisdiction and the drainage basin. And I thought we hit all the bumps yesterday. And it was more just a concern of trying to preserve as many trees, or at least try to preserve it. And like I said, we went tree by tree that needed to cut, and we agreed which ones could be saved. And so we'll be presenting that plan to them. Molly?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. I know there's that basin there, which looks man-made now. Does anybody know what that's from?
I think they gravelled it out at one point for one of the roadways around.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I mean, you can see where that berm that's on the back side of it, you can see it's definitely a man-made berm where somebody came in probably 40, 50 years ago and hogged the gravel out of there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, and then we had a comment from a member of the public, soon not to be a member of the public, Sue, that was, I believe this was on the subdivision plan itself, right? You saw this. I was just looking and didn't see this, but that it said on page 2, Sunnyside Lane definitive subdivision plan revised 4/12/22. At lower left, it reads, I, the clerk of the town of Concord, and ellipsis, since the filing And the certificate of approval for Cuca Road. So there was one spelling
It's still in
error.
there?
Still paying for road.
And so that should be updated.
I will.
And the word decision is also got an extra I for good luck.
Ah, it does. All
All
right. We'll fix those typos. Thank you, Sue, for pointing that out.
The only thing the board does need to do is the applicant has granted a time extension for
Okay.
the board to file its decision to June 17th.
Great,
So
okay.
the board does need to move and accept that time extension.
Okay, so I'd make a motion.
Hold on,
Oh, yeah,
wait. we have a public- Situation 1977, may I make a comment?
yes, please.
So the sidewalk plan seems good to me. I have one question about it, which may actually be more for engineering or public works and not relevant to this application. You guys will know, than me. Which is with the sharp curve in the sidewalk. When it is winter and snowy, how will the sidewalk plow know where the sidewalk goes?
It's Mark White from AWMW. That Molly wasn't at the site meeting yesterday because she was, that was one of my notes here was to talk about the sidewalk shift, because if you go up a little further, you can see where there's a bend. So we plan to go back a little further toward town center to make that a more gradual transition.
Sound good?
In those stakes, it will be, the
Does the
thing,
town put stakes in like that?
In some locations.
in some locations, if it was my,
On Lowell
Yeah,
Road,
they might.
on Lowell Road, they do, as it goes up and around.
The residents put them in another one.
yeah, we've done them on mine. Yeah. Good question. Okay.
Just one question. Did Natural Resources ask you for any of the trees that are going to be taken down to replant and put?
Yeah, it'll be at this point, it'll be a 1-to-1 for any tree that's living. There's a couple of dead trees that will turn into snags. So yes, there will be any living tree.
And that will be in a final plan, we'll be able to see. And
I'm sorry.
will we see where the new trees will go in?
Well, I think we just put a generic note on there saying that the trees would be located in this general area to be approved by town staff and species to be approved by town staff. Would that fall into the NRC's jurisdiction, or is that?
So for any of the trees for the development of the lots themselves, any of the trees that are within that NRC jurisdiction will be within their jurisdiction for the replacement. Any of the trees outside their jurisdiction will be subject to the tree preservation bylaw. So they'll kind of be two processes, depending on where the trees to be removed are located.
I don't need to know this going forward, but is that typically part of a subdivision approval, determining where trees are? Not?
No, it'd be for prior to the issuance of the building permit for the development of each of those lots.
Right, okay.
The applicant is required for the subdivision to plant a certain number of trees and has asked for a waiver of that. That was part of your previous
Right.
report, to allow those trees to be planted in conjunction with the abutters, to allow trees to be planted along, the roadway on abutters properties if they wish to have it there. Otherwise, they'll be planted on the lots where they can be fit.
But presumably not along any sites
Laws.
of Losbrook. Right.
No,
Right.
Okay.
You can get the town to do that for free. Okay, any other questions, comments? All right, Elizabeth, you're gonna have to tell me that date again,
so it's June 14th
June 14th.
at 7 p.m.
So I would move that we continue the public hearing until June 7th,
June
June
14th.
14th at 7 p.m.
I second that motion.
Right? Kristen?
Yes. All you have to do is go all in favor.
All in favor? All right, because we're here. Great. Well, everybody's in favor. Thank you.
And now you have to do the time extension. Move to accept the time extension
and
to
we-
June 17th.
And I would move that we accept the applicant's time extension to, for the public hearing until June 17th. All in favor? Great. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Great. Thanks for your time, guys.
When do we need to have those revised plans in?
I can talk to Justin, but
Yeah, I mean, it's all minor
Sooner.
revisions. So
yeah,
most of
then
it counts.
submit them one, I need one full-size set and then electronically and I'll send them to Justin.
The way we normally submit.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your night.
Okay, so we are slightly ahead of schedule. We have another public hearing for 7:30. But that's a public hearing for the site plan review application of Hung Wu, applicant under section 11.8 of the zoning bylaw for a change of use from a dry cleaner to a restaurant at 191 Sudbury Road. But the applicant has withdrawn the application. And so it's recommended the board should move to accept the withdrawal without prejudice. So I would move that the board accept the withdrawal of the application for public hearing without prejudice.
Second.
Thank you, Andrew. All in favor? Great. Is that okay? We got that done 10 minutes before the scheduled time. Okay.
That's fine.
That brings us to our first administrative item, which is draft scenic roads bylaw rules and regulations.
So tonight's is not an in-depth discussion of the rules and regulations. It is just to everybody to kind of review them, see if you had any, I'm going to say, overarching questions or things that you had been thinking about, and whether you felt something was missing or whether you felt one of the items in there you wanted to make sure that the Historical Commission or Public Works Commission or stakeholders looked at that and provided their comments or opinions or suggestions.
And the source of these model bylaws is what?
The source of these rules and regs is me.
Is you?
So I drafted them based on, I received 3 different examples from town council, from different communities. Members of the Historical Commission had also provided me 3 or 4 different examples from other communities, and just put them together in a draft as best I could.
Okay.
So that's why, because these have not been discussed by the Historical Commission or Public Works or Engineering, I didn't feel the board should go in any detailed conversation, but just if something jumped out at you that you felt you wanted those boards and committees or stakeholders to review and provide their comments or opinions or suggestions, if there was something specific that jumped out at you.
I think what. Can I be recognized?
Of course.
With my mask on. I think what jumped out at me in terms of the thing that I consider something for the board to focus on is the exemptions. And which is 3.5. And for example, installation of pavement markings or signage in the public road right of way. I mean, how extensive would that be? I would think on some historic ways, it doesn't say like flashing lights, like if you have, the you're crossing the road in terms of a walking trail, but I just what that I don't know if we need examples or ways to think about that. Repair repair or maintenance of a stone wall. Well, what constitutes repair and maintenance? I mean, to what extent?
So
Would you
for,
limit that? Just like a blanket exemption seems to me not something I'm completely comfortable with, but I really haven't thought through what the exemption should be, and especially with regard to cutting removal of trees by the town. You know, that they could just clear cut all the trees. It says as determined by the tree warden. So that is what I think I'd want to focus on.
okay, so, right, so potentially like a definition for what repair and maintenance of a stone wall is.
Potentially.
So for pavement markings, there's never going to be a need to remove trees or destruct a stone wall to put down pavement markings. So it really doesn't, it really doesn't even need to be in there, but I feel that that's something that Public Works will like it to be in there regardless of the fact that you don't need to cut a tree down or remove a stone wall to do pavement markings.
Mhm.
So
True.
you have to understand this is only triggered when there's trees removed or a stone wall is,
That's true. Right, okay.
so, but repair and maintenance definition.
I'm trying to remember the specific, there were exemptions in the bylaw.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And hang on one second.
I think that there was, given the focus that was on the concerns expressed by the Public Works Commission at town meeting on this, I would want to make sure that we didn't carve back the exemptions. The words maybe the basis of some people's comfort in voting for it.
Right, so that first exemption is actually within the bylaw
Okay.
to allow the town to cut or remove for roadway maintenance.
Installation of utilities. Installation of utilities.
So I'll go back,
Yeah.
back and just look at the actual wording of the bylaw.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the utilities one is where makes me a little bit nervous. Like, I think there's some people that have started, I've seen, to go underground utilities to new construction.
They're required to go under.
There now, okay, all right, so maybe it's less of an issue.
So, and help me understand, because I haven't thought about the public shade tree law, which I think is probably in part because it doesn't really concern the planning board because public shade trees are in the public way, right?
Correct.
So does that provide, I mean, it sounds like, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, we don't need to, but I'm thinking about, utilities, if they're coming through and, let's say they're putting up a new utility line or replacing utility line, so they've got to cut back a tree. Is the public shade tree law implicated there that provides some kinds of protections or review by the tree warden?
For just maintenance of a tree? No, the public
Okay.
shade tree is only for removal
For removal?
of a
Okay.
public shade tree.
Okay. It seems like you can't just, it's hard to, protection of utilities is pretty sacrosanct in terms of their ability to.
Their ability to prune for public safety.
Right. Understand.
Well, pruning is.
What I always I find amazing is the planting the trees underneath the utility line,
Oh,
and then they grow up and they become these.
get me stupid. Remember who my husband worked for, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll look at the bylaw language that was adopted specifically regarding that exemption. And to Haley's point,
I guess, yeah, just anecdotally, like I've flagged to Delia And then again, I don't know if I'm confusing like just the general tree preservation bylaw with this. They're converging more than I thought maybe, but maybe just in my head, but like, there's a particular new construction house that is clearly in violation of like the setbacks around a particular tree in West Concord, and it was blamed on National Grid for the gas line that they brought into the house, but
Right, that tree is on the private property, not within the public way. So the
Yeah, I'm
tree
just trying to think,
preservation
like-
bylaw
mhm,
would be the private property side of things, and the scenic road
Yeah.
bylaw would be the public.
got it. Yeah, I'm just
side of
trying to think
things.
like, could that apply or ever be relevant on the public side of it, in the public right of way? It's like,
It would-
whoops, like,
If it was national grid and just trenching,
and I mean, in that particular case, and since I know people that live on that street who said no way that was actually National Grid, but we have no way of knowing for sure if it was or wasn't, like, but conveniently, we get to blame utilities for doing bad things, right? Because like, they get to do whatever they want. I'm just,
so,
Brainstorming.
so for national grid, yes, this would have applied.
got it. Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking like, is there extra language? I mean, in here, it sounds like maybe the tree warden needs to be notified more in advance than if it's on the private side. But in theory, I guess number one should kind of have some oversight to make sure that, if somebody blames the utility for ruining something under this bylaw, like that it was actually the utility and not the developer or something.
So under this bylaw, National Grid would have to apply for a permit,
Got it, okay.
or that developer of that property would have to apply for a
Got it,
permit for this.
Okay, right.
Because only the town would be exempt.
Got it.
So one general comment is, much of what we consider under the zoning bylaw is special permits, right? So we sort of have, in my mind, that we have a standard of review for special permits, meaning like, you can't do something, but if an applicant does the following things, or there are these a certain set of specified circumstances, so long as it doesn't have a negative impact on, some listed things, you can grant the special permit. Whereas like a variance is, the standard of review is much higher in terms of if somebody can't do this, and you would only ever grant a variance if they prove the following things. I always, in my mind, think of it as the difference between like a civil case and a criminal case, a preponderance of the evidence versus, with beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not quite that, but in these rules and regs, it says here are the considerations of the decision. But what I don't get is whether the board should go in one direction or the other. If somebody comes forward with an application, says, yeah, I want to have 2 driveways, so I want to have 2 gaps in the wall instead of 1. If the board would say, well, okay, or like, if the burden is put on the applicant to show that they've considered all other alternatives or things like that.
Isn't that 3.4.6 sort of?
Well, yeah, I guess that.
I mean, you could point, I'm just not, I've never been in one of those conversations before, but
I mean, I was
will
just
stop somebody from asking, but.
Yeah, I mean, what I was just sort of trying to get at is that idea of sort of a standard of review. Like, should the deck be stacked against the applicant, or should it be in their favor if they can show certain elements? I think the intent is it should be stacked against them because you don't want to tear down walls.
They're trying to preserve the
Yeah.
scenic roads, so.
So is it, you're looking for just additional language to assist in evaluating, or?
Well, I could imagine it saying something like this.
What section are we
We're
in?
looking at 3.4
3.4
considerations of decision.
Okay,
That a request to remove a wall will be this is not the exact words, denied unless the applicant can show that there's a public safety reason for doing it, or that there's an absence of any reasonable, commercially reasonable alternative, things like that.
Okay, so modifying the language of 3.4 to have there be a higher burden of proof.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean that to be a general comment for people to think about, and I don't need to wordsmith it.
Well, and I can send that back to the historical commission as well, and
I bet they'll come down with something.
well, but I can also, I'm gonna reach out to stakeholders and developers and get their feedback as well. So,
Okay.
okay.
With regard to action by the town under the exemption, is there a situation where the town would be removing a stone wall for the installation of utilities? That's it, because this only covers trees, but I'm just making sure that's intentional, or
No,
if it's-
they
I can't imagine one.
usually, I don't
They
think
would
we've seen any removal of stone walls. They usually just dig under them and lay in conduit.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Regarding Linda's original comment about the definition, you have a definition on page 2 for repair, maintenance, reconstruction, or paving work. But it doesn't talk about like the extent, it just talks about what's meant by those terms.
Well, that's just, yeah, she was talking about repair maintenance. What is the definition of repair maintenance of a stone wall?
Okay, and that definition wouldn't be enough.
Any work done?
It's too general.
Well, this is just dealing with work on what is considered work on a road.
Okay, because it's a paving work. So I'm just thinking of what you would add separately, what definition you would add to this section.
Well, should repair, maintenance, and reconstruction cover anything within the right of way as opposed to just within the roadway? I don't know what the implications are going forward down that.
So this current definition under 144 is, it should be repair, maintenance, reconstruction, or paving work within a road. And then I think Linda was talking about what is the definition of repair, maintenance of a stone wall.
Okay.
So they would be two different things.
And you've highlighted section in 5.
Yes, we have to figure out why. Oh, so this was a section from a different community, and I was going to, I think this section needs to be reworded so it's consistent with the tree preservation bylaw.
Which towns did the historic commission send along as examples?
Oh,
I'm just curious, like where this draft landed.
I
Like,
have Dover, Ipswich, Carlisle, Hubbardston, Linfield, Norwell, Wellesley. What else?
was there like a dramatic difference in any of the examples between all the ones that were sent to you?
The biggest difference, some of the communities make their rules and regs and their bylaws kind of with one document. And all of the requirements that go into going to town meeting and actually selecting a road to go to town meeting for consideration, all of that was also in there more as a bylaw and not as rules and regs. So that was one of the difference. But
As far as like exemptions though, are they all kind of the same?
no, some of the communities granted greater latitude for the for town projects. Any town project was exempt.
Well, thanks for putting this together.
I like the remediation, and considering these are historic trees, I think it should specify that you need to replace on a square inch by square inch basis with an equivalent number of trees. So if they cut down one giant tree, they have to transplant in like a giant tree. I actually,
well-
joking aside, I wonder whether it would make sense to reference, to have a cash payment thing like we have in the tree preservation bylaw, because somebody could cut down an enormous tree that
So
would cost them
that's,
$50,000.
So, and that's the other thing, as I sit here and think about it, it's, and this is something that the board may want to consider is, in a lot of instances, we try to have bylaws and requirements be mirrored in certain things. But I'm wondering if, now, based on Burton, your comment, because the tree preservation bylaw is for, for every inch, it's half an inch.
50%, yeah.
So that's not much of a deterrent when you think about, let's say it was, a 30-inch oak. For safety reasons, they said, well, we have to cut this down for safety reasons. And didn't go the extra step that, the board just had a discussion with to figure out a way where that tree didn't have to come down. So, this is a square inch per square inch replacement means that the combined area of the replacement tree measures 1 foot above ground equal to the total area of their original trunk. I'm wondering if the replacement requirement should be more of a deterrent instead of less of a deterrent.
You mean in this bylaw versus the tree preservation
Yeah.
bylaw?
Well, could you mandate a minimum size tree that has to be planted?
Well, but you
6
can,
inches or less, like that it has to be, you have to put in,
well,
large
so,
size
but
trees.
that's
or is that
a,
too aggressive? I just don't know what's possible.
no, so actually like a 2.5-inch tree will adapt and grow better than if you try and replant like a 8-inch tree.
Yeah.
So, but
You'd have to plant a forest and you consider like how, I remember something about pi square r. It's a lot of tree.
so, I mean, this may actually be a better measure of replacement, and as you suggested, Bert, putting in the cash,
Yeah.
the cash value as well, and because I can tell you under the tree preservation bylaw, $375 an inch is a significant deterrent.
Oh, it is.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
Oh, yeah.
If you ever like pencil that out,
Okay,
there was a
right.
tree that I thought was under threat and I realized it was like $40,000.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a significant deterrent. So, so I can add that in this as well. I think that's,
I mean, just the thought is, right, we're talking about a public tree, right? In a public way. If some Yahoo comes in and cuts down a historic tree without going through this process, because this is really where it kicks in, is if they don't do anything, they just cut it down. I kind of want the town to be responsible for replanting the trees in a way that makes sense to the town with a big kitty of money to pay for trees. I mean, you don't want the same person to be like, okay, I'm going down to Home Depot and getting a bunch of yews and planting the Great Wall of Yews down the side of the road.
oh, so you're saying don't even have a tree replacement, just have the money. And
Almost like a fee for
Well,
violating it.
I don't know.
and
It's a
then that
thought.
goes to the tree warden and.
The tree warden and then and they buy the trees that they put back there and like plant
Right.
those up.
More likely that they survive and they're great ones.
I would think the historic commission might want to ensure though that that money actually gets used to specifically replant there.
So I'll put that as a question for the Public Works Commission and Public Works staff and the Historical Commission, and saying, here's 2 options.
How much funding has been raised through the tree preservation bylaw to date?
Well, there's one particular developer in West Concord who has had to pay quite a bit.
Really?
Yeah, like $25,000.
Well, he probably hasn't. I mean, he passes it along. It's the cost of doing business and, like,
That's not that much.
Well,
But that's disappointing.
What street is that on?
Main Street and Highland Street.
But it just goes into the sale cost of the house, you know, I mean, that's
Well,
not ideal.
Well,
So was it-
falling prices though.
Oh, okay. All right, so yeah, it was good for thought. Anybody else have comments on this? As we, you guys get the assignment? All right,
Do you have public comment on it or?
yeah,
I have one other,
yeah, go ahead.
just in terms of, as a stone wall is, I think you said, in terms of definition, is man-made continuous groupings of stones forming a straight or curved line. So to me, there are so many varieties of stone walls in Concord. Some, you know, just look like a farmer just threw a bunch of random stones out of the fields, and others are built up and magnificent, and you know, and just are would be massively different in terms of replacement. So I don't know, some like if a stone wall is needs to be replaced or repaired, it should be in kind or in similar
I will,
construction to the adjacent wall portions or something like
I'll
that.
talk to the senior planner and get some suggestions on that.
You have public comment, Burton.
Yes,
Hi, Sue Belcher, 19 Sunnyside Lane. Yes, following on what Linda said, it seems like the bylaw ought to have some parameters for what constitutes in kind. I remember an example of a nearby national park that installed a stone wall just like the old stone walls, but they went to the wrong quarry from the wrong part of Massachusetts. The walls are orange and they do not look like local native stone walls at all, but they can't afford to do anything about it. So also, does repair of a stone wall include pouring mortar over it or converting it to a straight mortared wall? I mean, you can't require somebody to 100% match the exact existing wall. So there has to be some squishiness in the language of the bylaw. And going on what you commented on, Burton, about maybe rather than requiring replacement of trees, require a fine or a fee so that the town could do so instead. It could also, is it possible for the bylaw to require that the homeowner can do their own replacement, but the tree warden has to sign off on the plan being considered suitable, so that there's some leeway in it, and yet the homeowner can't put in the stupid wall of views that dies in a year because they're bad trees. Thanks.
Houston.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
So I'm Mark Giddings, 474 Barris Mill Road. A couple of things. I think you want some flexibility in the program, because if somebody comes and has this beautiful stone wall that they tear down, that should be replaced with something like that, as opposed to somebody who's just got a bunch of stones. Okay, and I think it's really difficult to build all that into a regulation.
Mm,
You want some sort of flexibility in it. I mean, that's what the commission's for, is to
Right.
make those kind of decisions. So I'd recommend sort of leaving it a little loose, if you will. Okay, not so loose that people can jump through it, okay, and take you to task over it, but that it had some flexibility, okay? In terms of, this is a public way, okay? So when you talk about tearing down trees on a public way, the town is not going to put trees back into that public way. I can tell you from personal experience. You know, the town has, what is it, 8 or 10 feet on either side of most roadways that is the town property. They're not going to, if the tree is on that and they cut it down because it's diseased or they have to do something, they're not going to put it back in that place. They don't want trees that close to the road anymore. They're going to put it back. They replaced 3 trees in my yard and they made me put them back 10 feet into my front yard. Okay. So, you know, I
They're
think
gonna do it on Upland though. I don't, Still sound consistent with what I'm seeing.
But upland would not be considered a scenic road.
That's
Maybe there's there's dimensional requirements different or
Right.
something.
And I don't think that the scenic roadway had nothing to do with it. I can tell you that they didn't replace them on their property any longer. They didn't want to do that, okay? Because a couple of reasons. One is by putting them on my property, it becomes my upkeep, not theirs, okay? Which is a big deal, okay?
And also the salt and sand
Right, I think
are
that's.
Right,
detrimental to
right,
the
yeah,
life.
it's just
You know,
not
so
good.
they don't,
Yeah,
they
right.
want to push it off onto the,
So I think we should
Really
you should be aware of that,
extremely
you know, chances are they're not gonna replace them in the same place anyways, okay?
Yeah, but they're not like asking.
And
people
for the
for
most part, this is
it.
gonna be the town that's doing this. Sure, it might be National Grid, but I think an awful lot of it is gonna be the town that is looking to make these moves, because it's their property. Okay, we're not talking about private property.
No, I think mostly it will be the developers of undeveloped lots putting in new driveways
Okay.
is what will trigger this.
Yeah.
But I can ask that, to Mark's point, I can ask Public Works that to investigate that comment and question about when it comes to replanting as well.
Yeah, okay.
another point that came up based on Sue's comment is, should there be a duration? That is, should there be a, you know, the plant has to survive. You know, I know. we have-
I can tell you under the tree preservation bylaw, that it's absolutely almost 100% impossible to enforce
Yeah.
and monitor. And you can add it, but
It would really be on paper only, it sounds like.
yeah, I mean, the tree warden may drive by it and be able to do something, but it becomes almost impossible to enforce.
Not, I don't, Natural Resources is very good at enforcing it because they put a lien on your property. I'm not kidding.
Is that-
Yeah, because that's happened to me.
Well, you have
And I
a
had a 3-year lien, which wasn't really exciting when I wanted to refinance my
No
mortgage.
kidding.
No kidding.
Well, you
But
have your order of conditions and you don't get that order released. You don't get a certificate of compliance
Right. which is a
until
lien,
they
which the
inspect and
bank
do everything.
considers a lien on your property.
Well, you have
Yeah.
you have an open order of conditions.
So,
Right.
but so that's,
It clouds
you're
the
saying
title.
this would be for the duration, so a year or something? There
me, I
could
had to
potentially
have
be a
3
lien
years.
for a year and then.
Well, it's not a lien.
Okay.
Okay,
You
it's
have
an order of
an
conditions.
open order of conditions that clouds the title until there is, because it specifically says you have to get a certificate of compliance.
Right.
So under this scenic roads bylaw, we're not talking about a decision that gets issued and recorded on the property. We're talking about it's just a decision.
Okay,
I mean, that hasn't been part of the conversation to have something that gets recorded and inspected and then a certificate of compliance issued and have that get recorded. So I mean, that wasn't
okay.
something that was
Intended.
discussed. And that's the same issue with the tree preservation bylaw. It's a permit, but it's not getting recorded on the property. And a certificate of compliance isn't being issued and recorded on the property. That's the difference with natural
Okay.
resources. Is that order of conditions without that certificate does cloud the title.
Okay.
How does this interact with the HDC on streets like Barrett's Mill Road and Monument Street, you know, the ones that are within the district? I mean, they obviously would look at somebody, a builder putting a driveway in and tearing down a stone wall and make some, you know, criteria for them to be able to do that. Okay, so I guess after that happens, then they come before this.
Correct.
Okay.
So perhaps this should go to HDC as well as the Historic Commission.
Well, the HDC will have, I'm gonna say like ultimate jurisdiction.
But only a
over-
few of these streets are within the HDC. Okay, they aren't all. Okay.
Right.
So they would have like ultimate jurisdiction over what somebody is doing.
What about the Concord Public Works Construction and Tree Protection Standard Operating Procedures? How does that relate?
This is their public works procedures for what they do in the public road right of way.
I was just searching about it and it's just a 3-page document that says, about public shade trees and protection coordination and.
Yep, so that's under the public shade tree and the tree warden.
Okay.
Um,
But are we talking about, it sounds like we're talking about two things. We're talking about the stone walls and the trees with this.
Yep.
Okay. But isn't there something that already protects the trees because they're in the public way?
So, so this was part of the I'm gonna say discussion with the adoption of the bylaw.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to put in a circular driveway and remove public shade trees, they would go to the tree warden and the tree warden could say, well, why don't you, look at, do this.
Okay.
If a developer was developing 3 separate lots and wanted to break through the stone wall on 3 separate times and put in driveways and went to the tree warden to remove a tree for each one of those driveways, the tree warden would have to assess just each one of those driveways. He does not have the ability to ask the developer to say, well, we want you to evaluate only one driveway and use a common driveway, so you don't have to punch through the wall 3 times.
Okay.
And remove all of these trees. So it's a slightly higher level of protection. And the planning board has the ability to affect change more so than the tree warden.
Okay.
Just a question, if Public Works decided that one of the historic streets was too narrow and they wanted to add 4 feet, 2 feet on each side as a safety issue, there's a lot of traffic on that road. Would anything in this as proposed prohibit or discourage that, or require them to get a hearing? Or
If they were to remove trees to add the pavement on each side, then they would come before the planning board to get a permit under the scenic roads bylaw.
but under the exemptions, cutting or removal of trees by the town in connection with right-of-way maintenance.
Adding 4 feet is not maintenance.
Okay.
That's why you want the definition.
It seems to me the exact opposite holds. That
Or
there are-
to mitigate or avoid hazardous conditions.
Okay.
There are a bunch of roads around town that are wider than necessary. Lexington Road comes to mind. It's more than a lane wide in each direction. And if we really want to have our roads be historically scenic, we should remove asphalt, leave room for trees in the public way, and without them being so intruded upon by salt, and have less pavement to increase our carbon footprint and heat index.
So that's it.
Turning radius allowed. I know.
That wouldn't trigger the scenic roads bylaw.
Not yet. Not until she's on board.
But
Yeah,
then if
we're
I-
gonna run into complete streets and
Widen up the
cycling and
bikes, yeah.
pedestrian.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
completely outside this conversation. If Public
Just
Works
the
wanted to
secret.
reduce the width of a road, they wouldn't remove a tree and they wouldn't remove a stone wall. So this bylaw would not be triggered. And it's not part of this conversation, because I'm not going there.
That's important. And when, are we waiting to hear back from the Attorney General? I'm just curious when this bylaw is in effect.
So the town clerk just submitted the submittal to the Attorney General, so they have 90 days.
Wow, and you already have this first draft. That's great, thank you. That's great.
I can't imagine this one's gonna get hung up on at the AG review.
No, I
I
was
don't
just,
imagine so.
no, I was just thinking about when. you
But
know,
general
might be right.
bylaws do not go into effect until they're approved by the Attorney General. Zoning bylaws go into effect as of town meeting. Unless the Attorney General finds deficit in the legal requirements or deficit in the bylaw itself.
And this was a general,
This is a general bylaw.
And if the Attorney General finds something with, like you were saying, it would be within the first 90 days after filing?
Typically.
Okay.
For really complicated bylaw amendments, the Attorney General can unilaterally grant themselves an extension.
Okay,
They don't even have to ask.
okay.
They just tell.
all right. So this will come, you're gonna get some input, come back before the board in a meeting or two.
Probably, I'll, at least not for a month, this won't come back.
All right,
Ultimately, adoption of this requires a notice of public hearing.
okay,
Um,
okay,
So depending on meeting schedules for the Historical Commission and Public Works Commission and town staff, the board may not see this back for a month and a half.
okay. I think that brings us to, if anybody's got any further comment, we have some minutes.
And I can share my
Yeah, to which
screen.
we've already received some valuable.
So Linda had sent
Just not correct.
her comments, and sorry, I wasn't able to, at the conference, to get on, so, and she just went through, and it's the highlighted areas. Most of it is just,
I think that one, I thought,
didn't need to be there, and I
Didn't.
agree.
okay,
It says, and not selling to a developer. It's a much more pleasant thank you without it, so
Yes, agreed.
I agree. And spelling out HDC. Anybody want me to tell me if I'm going too slow, too fast?
I would go up to the part where you put about architects on the bottom of the, and say because of potential perceived conflicts of interest. I think that's what we were saying, right?
Where are
yes,
we?
perceived, yes,
Last sentence, yeah.
yeah, potential.
Potential perceived conflicts of interest.
Well, perceived, I can't spell today.
Don't you just have perceived?
It'll help you.
Yeah,
Doesn't perceived take away the need for potential? Because then it's just,
Probably. You could get rid of potential.
Okay, so perceived. Okay,
I would say conflicts of interest though, instead of just conflict.
Oh, you weren't talking about fisticuffs?
you never know.
okay. I think that was just an extra space, right? And that's it.
Thank you, Linda, for giving us a close read. And I thought they were excellently prepared, though I'm sure we all.
Oh, yes. I'm gonna apologize. It's been a long time since I've had to do minutes.
Yeah.
And now I know why I don't like them. All over again. They're very challenging
Can we
to
make,
participate and,
right,
so,
It's funny, I once was like a pro bono work, and I had this even counts as pro bono work. I was like the secretary of this like choral group in Boston. It was like a pretty big time deal, but it was like a nonprofit, and they wanted their minutes like every word. I'd leave there with like 20 to 30 pages of typed minutes from the meetings.
What a transcript.
Whereas like corporate minutes, you generally want to keep to the absolute
Yeah.
minimum. There's no public disclosure requirement. You don't want to get sued over something. So they're like, we had a meeting,
right.
decisions were made.
So should we move to adopt the minutes as amended?
yes,
I
please.
would do that.
As amended. I'll second that.
Should we vote?
All in favor? That's so much easier.
It is.
All right.
I do notice in here that you're working, that in that meeting, we were talking about the site plan
Yes,
regs, and is there an update on when those are coming back?
I'm desperately gonna try and have them back for the June 14th meeting.
Do you have enough support from the person who is helping?
I will.
The MAPC one?
No, yeah, she's helping.
Okay.
Yeah, she's definitely helping.
Okay, good.
My news, town planner news.
Yeah.
Today's Tuesday. Yeah. Yesterday, our new admin assistant, Haley Walker, started.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
she will be supporting the senior planner, the ZBA, HDC, Historical Commission, and Community Preservation Committee with the senior planner.
Who's the senior planner?
Currently, it is Heather Gill. Tuesday will be her last physical day. She has been retained as a professional consultant. The town has made a job offer to somebody and it has been accepted. We are now just waiting for the HR process
Great.
to happen. But we're hopeful that this person will also be starting in the next couple of weeks.
Super.
Yeah, so, and then your minutes will be on time again.
So we won't be having the hearing for the site plan. We'll just have another.
No, you'll have a, yes,
review.
you'll just have a working session. And then after that, just that working session to get the boards, then it's similar to the scenic roads. Then it will go out to stakeholders, developers, architects, landscape architect, and just start getting feedback for the board's consideration before you have the public hearing, which is also required for the adoption of those as well.
All right. Any other town planner or?
My only other update is I believe we have funds in the planning division budget to get assistance from a transportation planner to update the zoning
So,
requirements for
yeah.
parking. However, the select board will also be discussing, I believe, and I know select board Escobedo is on, but I have heard that the select board will be discussing possibly looking at more of a townwide parking management, parking discussion. And so if they do move forward with that, it's my goal that the zoning side of parking also gets incorporated into that.
I would like to raise the topic and see how other people feel about if we could get that planning, parking study, include an assessment of traffic at the Concord, at the Thoreau Business District zoning issue. It seemed like traffic was a concern, and it would be lovely to go back and have had some kind of input from a, since we're doing parking studies and traffic studies of that as well. I know the scope may not fulfill everybody's ambitions, but I think it would be nice to have that component. I would be happy if the planning board made that request of the select board to include that, reflecting what we heard at town meeting. Just wondered if anyone else had thoughts on that.
I think that should be included.
I mean, are they generally related, traffic and parking? Like, in terms of you said you're applying for a grant?
There was a traffic.
No, I have some leftover planning division funds.
Oh, okay.
They would definitely not be sufficient to do a traffic study of the Thoreau
You're
Depot.
talking about making consultant to propose modifications to the parking requirements.
In the zoning bylaw,
Right.
yes.
So you're not actually going out and doing a field study.
No,
Okay,
that's what the select board is talking
Yeah.
about, is doing a parking analysis of like the public parking, the metered parking, turnover analysis for, is everything sufficient? Is it deficient? So with that information, possibly doing a parking analysis of the zoning bylaw. So Concord Center, we just have in the zoning bylaw parking requirements for a restaurant. Well, should the zoning bylaw take in the parking requirements in Concord Center for a restaurant be modified and take into consideration the metered parking on the street that has a turnover rate of this, gives them a credit,
Right.
and have the zoning, so not every single business has to go for a special permit for relief from parking. And kind of build the existing system into the zoning bylaw and the parking requirements for those uses. So that's different than what was brought up for the Thoreau Depot, and that's a traffic study and traffic counts and turning movements and wait times and that's something different.
Well, maybe.
That, but also wasn't their concern about loss of parking?
That part, yeah.
Well, that's
That would be part of the bigger picture, right?
that's the commuter, the 54 spaces of commuter parking. But that wouldn't be part of a traffic study. A traffic study is volume and wait times and turning movements and level of service. How the, for Thoreau Depot, how the train schedule impacts, the traffic and turning movements and wait times. And so there is a new grant program that the state has just started, that it may be able to help with that aspect of a traffic study. And that's something that just sent to the town engineer, because that would have to be done through engineering. It wouldn't be done through planning, but.
And if that is done, I think a similar one should be done in West Concord, where we have a mixed use or, development and train tracks to see, comparably, how is the traffic and things like that.
It's so much worse than West Concord.
With the train.
I mean, what's.
But was it, I wonder if we have a before and after when that.
Oh, yeah, no, it hasn't gotten any worse.
Right,
But in
exactly.
West Concord, we take our medicine.
Well, it just feels like, anyway, we might not be able to talk about it, but it just feels like there could be a traffic study done at that intersection where the train is and Thoreau Business Depot is like, yeah, this is bad. But that doesn't give us necessarily information about either how to make it better or what would make it worse or better if there was more development there. So that's all so I was curious to know if there was a comparable situation in West Concord. We could say, yes, the traffic is still bad because of the train tracks, but it was not impacted by a mixed use development that went in with X number of units.
I don't think it's really bad at the Thoreau Business Depot, other than when the high school adds a tremendous crush in the morning, no pun intended, in the morning period, kids getting to school. But I don't think you could replicate that in West Concord.
That's an interesting point. Speaking of that, I hope they look at the parking at the high school. Because every year that comes up, like, we need more parking. So I think that's exciting that the select board wants to kind of look at that holistically. I hope that works well.
I mean, if you look at Laurel Street in the morning, it's all high school kids.
Sure it is.
It's crazy. Other topics.
What else? You have a few hangers on the line if they.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna make another pitch, so, I guess, committee updates, right, so, I'm the CPC representative, and unlike, I think, most of the other, committee assignments, it really is like, it's an actual committee appointment, it's not just a liaison role.
Correct.
And so.
Designee.
Designee. So it is like being on two committees, being a voting member of it, which is a lot of time, especially in the winter, because all the meetings are compressed from the time of the applications in the early fall until issuing essentially recommendations for town meeting in the beginning of January. In November and December, which is, everybody's busy, is a busy time, sometimes weekly meetings. But it's a really cool committee. I really encourage people on the board to consider taking that role. And
Well, somebody's gonna have to take the role.
There'll probably be a fight for it.
somebody's gonna have to.
So-
Yeah, somebody's gonna have to, but I will say that I did it without knowing what the role was. And being on a committee that's about supporting projects around town financially is a really, it's not like we're going out and just picking things. They're coming to the committee, but supporting things as opposed to being involved in some of the stuff that can be more controversial on this board. It's a nice balance.
And the person would get to see you.
And get to see me, because I'm going to stay on that committee in a different capacity.
As a part of what?
I'm going to be a select board designee.
Oh, excellent.
All right, any online public comment? We have some folks in the meeting. I can't see them in here, but you can tell us if anybody raises their hand.
No one raised their hand.
Nobody raised their hand. All right, so then I think we can adjourn. I don't know if this is a record breaker, but it's pretty short. All right, if nothing else.
The only other thing I would like to thank Kristen and Burton for 5 years of, well, Burton, six
5.5. I think.
5.5 years. So thank you. It's always a pleasure to, for some reason, we get lucky with the people that come on the planning board, because
Well, thank you.
You all are awesome.
Thank you very
I
much.
appreciate it.
Great.
And
Oh.
congratulations, Kristen also got appointed to the new
DEI commission.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
So I'll
Wonderful.
start tomorrow.
Oh,
I took your advice, Linda.
Just as a general comment, I was communicating this with Kristen. I thought it was incredibly helpful as a chair to have Kristen here, who had been the chair the year before, because I think it's not until you're the chair that you really get all the stuff that goes on, not only in terms of having to be prepared for the meeting, but the stuff that happens outside the meeting and communications with you. And I thought that was great with Kristen around, and there might be some thought given to structuring it so that the expectation is that somebody would be the chair in their third or fourth year instead of in that last year. Anyway, just a thought.
Great.
And so then they're around for one more year to hand out sage moderating advice as Christians. So
So
Okay, believe
do
it.
we have to vote, or is Nathan like the de facto?
No, you have to vote.
Next time,
Oh,
when the
Next,
new members are
The
here.
next meeting,
Oh,
we will
okay.
vote for a chair, vice chair, and clerk.
Okay,
Nathan, as the current vice chair, will be acting chair for the meeting.
got it, okay.
But then you will go through and nominate and vote, and then go through your liaison appointments.
Yeah.
Or designees.
And do we need yet another?
So your next meeting, Sue Felshin has been appointed and Mark Giddings has been appointed. So there's the one partial term that with Kate leaving, it's a 2-year term
Okay.
that will need to be filled.
Got it. Do you need, there's no outstanding green cards or whatever for that?
Have been some green cards that have been forwarded to Burton and Nathan.
Okay.
Right?
All right,
All right, thank you.
thanks all.
All right. Thank you, everybody online.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was not